and experts from Microsoft and kind of sharing experiences that we have from our experts here at Microsoft. And the next one is going to be about governing at scale. It's actually going to be a conversation with Microsoft IT and how we are governing Power Platform here at Microsoft with less than 10 people managing the experience for over 300,000 employees across 45,000 environments. And you can hit up that link to join that call and look, add that to your calendar to listen into. So with those out of the way, we're now moving on to the presentation of the day. So hopefully, Lily, you're getting ready. You got yourself psyched up, ready to go. But we're going to listen to Lily Ho and let her talk to us about how AbbVie has progressed in their Power Platform journey and one use case around infrastructure automation. So Lily, if you want to introduce yourself and take it away. Oh, one other thing before you do that. Questions, feel free to plop them in the chat window or use the Q&A feature. Scott and I will monitor those questions. And actually, we're going to ask those questions at the end. So Lily's going to get through her presentation, and then we'll come at her with all the questions that you post in the chat or the Q&A. I appreciate it. Lily, it's all yours.
Great. Thank you, Randall. Thank you, Scott. Is my audio coming through okay?
Sounds great.
All right, perfect. Thank you. So I'll pull up my presentation first and then start with introductions. All right, look good?
We've got your screen.
Okay, great, perfect. So hello, everybody. Thanks for coming to listen to me talk today. So my name is Lily Ho. I'm the tech lead for low-code engineering at AbbVie. I'm here to talk about our Power Platform journey, how we got started with the platform, where we are today, and specifically dive into one of our first successful stories around utilizing the platform in infrastructure automation. Something I did want to call out is that the context and content of this presentation is mostly focused around Power Apps and Power Automate, some Dataverse and some other elements, but mostly those two. We have a very established practice separately for Power BI, but it's not really managed like the rest of the platform. And as for myself, I primarily manage platform strategy, Power Platform admin, and Power Apps and Automate focused strategic items. We have a separate admin and separate team for Power BI. So with that being said, as for myself, I have been working at AbbVie for about 4.5 years. I've mostly been in the automation space, and I come from a technical background. I was previously in engineering and developer roles for the most part. But I was first introduced to the platform, Power Platform itself, back in 2021, using it in automation. And then towards the end of 23, so last year, I was asked to be an admin for the Power Platform. So I've been doing that for roughly a year now, and recently took on the role of being tech lead for low-code engineering. A quick run through of what I'll talk through. So a quick introduction to AbbVie, talk about our journey with the platform. So where we started and where we are now, dive into our successes and challenges, what we found to be most helpful to us and what we're still struggling with, a success story around infrastructure automation and how we utilized Power Platform in that solution, and then wrap up with the future of Power Platform at AbbVie. All right, so AbbVie is a global biopharma company. We were founded in 2013 and are actually the pharma spinoff of Abbott Laboratories, who was our parent company. We're all headquartered in North Chicago, and the company focuses on the discovery, development, and manufacturing of different therapeutic drugs for a variety of different areas. This includes like immunology, oncology, neurology, and others. Some of our big products that you might have heard of or seen, in commercials or somewhere are Humira, things like Imbruvica, Venclexta, and we did recently, well, not so recently anymore, back in 22, acquire Allergan Aesthetics. So Botox is the under our portfolio as well. So all this to say, we are not a tech company by trade. Out of the 86,000 or so full-time employees at AbbVie, our central IT functions, which we call BTS, and you might see that referenced through the slides, Business Technology Solutions. This part of the company only has, I think, about at most 4,000 people, maybe. And that's not even just central IT, traditional IT functions, but also business teams who maybe depend on or work with IT more than others. So with that context, I'll dive into how did we start using the Microsoft Power Platform? How did we start and where are we at now? So I'm starting this with the adoption model that Microsoft actually published. And I got this from the first Power Platform conference 3 years ago and have really liked it and using it to benchmark where our adoption is and how it's progressed over the years. So we started with the platform back in 2017, and it really started with just pockets of users starting to use Microsoft Flow before it was called Power Automate. And it actually started with following our separation from Abbott. We were going through, and this was before my time, but we were going through a migration from SharePoint on-prem or SharePoint 2013 to SPO or SharePoint Online. And there were a lot of issues, is all I was told. And it was a process of trial and tribulations the whole time. And my boss, who was here at the time, ended up bringing in Microsoft Power Platform as a way to mitigate and get around a lot of the challenges during that migration. So that's how we started. And for the next 3 years, it was really just experimentation. Again, pockets of users, no real strategy, no real goals with the platform. The only people who were working on it were our O365 engineers who just kind of had this thrown under them as something else for them to just keep an eye on and manage as needed. So come 2020 to 2023, you probably guessed that with the pandemic, this greatly perpetuated the use of all technologies. And what we ended up going through is that 2 major things happened. We got our E3 and E5 licensing for all employees, and this meant that now all employees had standard access to Microsoft Power Platform from the get-go. So this meant as soon as someone was onboarded, they could go to make.powerapps and make.powerautomate and start making apps or flows. And that is naturally what happened, especially with everyone going online. And this is where we saw the first surge in apps and flows that were created, including our first enterprise-wide application. So this was a COVID vaccine registration app and symptom reporting app, which probably doesn't come as a surprise to a lot of folks. This is still before my time, but what my understanding is we piloted a solution in 2 of our locations, Sao Paulo in Brazil and Johannesburg, South Africa, because in these 2 particular areas, their health departments had very strict regulations around population density within workspaces. And those teams needed a quick and cost-effective way to have a solution that tracks all these symptoms that could be used by a lot of people and have data that can be sent back to these departments. And the solution ended up being pretty simple, but very impactful in that users would use this application to report their conditions before coming into work, get a go, no-go status. And then when they came on site, healthcare workers could pull up their records and update them accordingly based on the condition they arrived in, temperature checks and other checks when they got into the office. And as these records were As these records were updated, in the back end, there were calculations that took into account all of this data and the data about the workspaces and calculated the densities of people that were present in these buildings and in specific areas. And this basically was sent back to all of those health departments for each of these countries to report the conditions of their workspaces as people came into the office. And this worked so successfully that the teams at the time did end up rolling this out to some of our primary US locations as well. So I mentioned this use case because we consider it our first successful enterprise-wide application, and it greatly demonstrated to leadership the power of this platform and perpetuated the use and place that we are at now with the platform. So towards the tail end of 22, 23 is when we saw a great emergence in users for the platform, interest in the platform, resources being created on the platform. A champions network was formed for people to connect with each other. We saw different SMEs popping up. People started looking into premium licensing and really building solutions that had production dependencies. One thing I'll call out here, though, is if you'll notice in this stage, one of the criteria listed under this repeatable stage is a central team. Up until this point, there was still no central team. There were still no dedicated admins or dedicated anybody to the Power Platform. So all of this was really grassroots, community driven for the platform. So this brings me to 2024, tail end of 23 and 2024. This is when we got that central team, myself included. So with the introduction of this team and intentional work and effort being put towards facilitating and progressing this platform and supporting our users and all of the operational items, everything surged. So in terms of everything that's listed here, we started managing everything better, putting in the right governance and compliance pieces that we needed to manage the platform properly, really interacting with those champions networks and our users, because there was definitely a disconnect before between the admin team and our users. Seeing a lot of early digital transformation of a lot of manual processes, especially via Power Automate. That was the big one that people first started using. We do have a center of excellence. We do have formal intake processes now, and we actually have strategies and roadmaps to look to the future and not just work in a sort of firefighter operational state anymore. So I put our current stage kind of between these two because we really do have elements of both stages, but we're definitely not fully in these stages just yet. So something else I'll add in here now is that besides the adoption maturity model, we did, with all our changes, define a platform maturity model for ourselves that is comprised of 5 stages. And I won't go too in depth into this. And again, this is recorded, so if you want to look at this afterwards, you can. But I can summarize it by saying right now where our platform is that we have just enough support to keep the platform going and just enough to stay compliant with with our security teams, just enough governance, just enough processes to keep everything going and to support our users as it is. And we have just enough extra to keep promoting the newer elements of the platform and bring in the newer tools, bring in additional processes, and look into improving what we already have in place. It's really hard for me to explain all of this just because of how much we have been through in terms of transforming this newly formed team in the last year. We've been through a lot and it's been a trial by fire. But I can say that this is now an enterprise. This is recognized as an enterprise application by our leaders and in the organization and as a tool that anybody can use. So I don't think my slide moved. Okay. So diving into our current state now, I wanted to give some metrics to give you an idea of where we're at in 2024. So we currently have over 6,700 Power Apps. This is up from, honestly, a few hundred in 2020. We have over 1,200 unique app makers, and this is up from less than 100 in 2020. We have, and I like this metric in particular, probably my favorite, is that 1 in 5 of our 85,000 employees have used or touched a Power App. And we got this from our COE metrics and from the metrics in the admin center, showing that month over month, we have increased usage of people either making apps or utilizing them. And I just love this number and telling people about it. As for flows, we have over 20,000 Power Automate flows created by over 3,200 cloud flow makers. So you can definitely see that most people start with Power Automate when they're choosing between apps and Automate. And I like this metric too, which is that month over month, we have an over 90% successful flow run rate. And this is from an average of 1.5 to 2 million average monthly flow runs, especially in the last year, let's just say. Out of all those runs, over 90% are successful, and this rate has definitely gotten better over time, which is very indicative to us of the types of users who are using the platform. The guidance and support that we have put out seems to be helping because users are now more successful with their solutions. Couple more metrics here. We have over 60 countries represented by our makers. AbbVie has a presence in, I think, over 150 countries across the world. So for a little under half of those, there is someone there who is making an app or a flow or working with Power Apps or Power Automate. Again, we have, and this should really say 85,000, over 85,000. So all of our employees have standard licensing and can start building Power Apps and Power Automate solutions as soon as they join the company. And this is an interesting metric, especially in contrast to Microsoft's 45,000 environments. We only have 40 non-developer environments. If I included developer environments, it would probably be in the 500 range. And this is interesting because it has to do with our capacity in licensing, and because we didn't have an environment strategy a year ago. Everything was in default. And even now, a lot of things are still in default, but we are gradually moving towards a more robust environment strategy that has controlled ALM, DLP policies, and all the good stuff. The last metric I'll mention here, which is a pretty important one, is that everything that you just saw, the whole journey that we've been on and everything that's come out of the last year is managed by 2.5 people. The 0.5 probably throws some people off. But where that comes from is that there are only 2 people out of the 86,000 employees at AbbVie who are fully dedicated to the Power Platform. That includes myself, and as of March of this year, 1 other engineer. So that's the 2. The half comes from like other people who kind of help. Or rotational people, rotational students or full-time workers who pass through our area for maybe 8 months or a year to help with the platform, and then they move on to another team. And I also kind of throw my boss into the half, but really she's there for negotiations and escalations and major strategic decisions. So otherwise, there's only 2 of us who work on this platform as admins full-time and dedicate all of our time to this platform. And we're really proud of ourselves. We call ourselves a small but mighty team because we've taken the platform pretty far in the last year and are proud of ourselves of how far we've taken it. So that being said, where does all the success and pain come from? Because there's been a lot of both in the last few years. Our major successes, the biggest one is definitely the formation of a central admin team, albeit small, just because now with intention and support from leadership, we can dedicate all of our time to supporting and planning for this platform. So even again, if it's those 2.5, this has been the best thing that happened to the platform. It's really that dedicated time and the support from leadership to put full-time resources towards this platform now. DLP policies and environment strategies are also a big one for us. DLP strategies were put in place back even in around 2020, 21 when we started seeing that surge. And I did have a hand in that before I even became an admin. And our environment strategy, this greatly helped with capacity management and a proper resource allocation and optimization. Next, there was the central intake and request management. I mentioned this one just because before this, everything was word of mouth. Everything was emails and chats. You had to know the right people to get something done or get something that you needed for the platform. But our team now and the platform now has an established presence among all of the other enterprise platforms and applications that we have. So users now have a place to go, and it takes the burden off of us because we don't have, well, we still have a lot of people who come to us directly with chats and emails and calls, but it's definitely been curbed by the creation of these central processes. Our low-code community, honestly, I have a love-hate relationship with them. Some of them drive me up the wall, but for the most part, I consider it a success. Against this platform was grassroots started, and it's still very much driven by the community, and the community speaks to the nature of this kind of technology and what Microsoft Power Platform is. So I still love my partnership with them, interact with them regularly. They help each other, and by helping each other, it helps us. And then the last couple, of course, increased year-over-year adoption has always been great in across the board, across many things. And a specific one my engineers wanted me to call out was actually UI UX, which is that because we know from being early developers with the platform at AbbVie, FireApps is not very pretty in the beginning, borderline ugly, if I'm being honest. People didn't really like the way it looked, and it did turn people away from it. But through a partnership with our UI UX teams and a lot of the enhancements that have been pushed by Microsoft to the platform, we have seen beautiful applications being produced on the Power Platform now, more than we even expected to. And unfortunately, some of them I can't share, but they're now at the caliber of, you look at them and you're like, that's a Power App? How did you do that? No one thinks it's built on the Power Platform anymore because of how good it looks. And that's just something we're really proud of, because it definitely lends a hand to increased adoption, because people ask about it and then they go explore the tool themselves. Challenges, though, lots of pain, lots of those. First one is resourcing. Again, we don't really have a team besides the 2.5 folks dedicated to pushing and supporting this application. We are definitely overwhelmed. We say that this is fine dog that's on fire is our team logo. It's on my computer right now. Demand management has been very difficult, and that's just from the get-go. And I personally think it will forever be like this for a technology that's ever changing, especially one that changes as quickly as low-code technology. Licensing, I won't even dive into. If you're on this call, you know how challenging Microsoft licensing can be. Dataverse and capacity is also a challenge because of licensing. We just find ourselves hitting our caps all the time. And this touches on a couple different things. It's not just licensing, but also mindset. A lot of our users get so excited about making things, but not as excited about recycling them and tearing them down when they're done. There's a lot of stuff that says test in our environment that's just sitting there idly and taking up space, and we're still going through lots of cleanup. Strategic alignment and support, which I'll talk about a bit more later, has also been difficult, just because low code as a concept is still a gray area, not just in AbbVie, but I still believe in the industry as well. Not a lot of people know how they feel about it just yet. Strategically, leadership doesn't really know where to put it yet. Even in AbbVie, Power Platform has been kind of hot potatoed around different teams, and only recently landed with our we actually sit in our enterprise data team. So this one I'll talk about a bit more later. I won't dive too deeply into it now. And it has gotten better though. And then finally, security roles. This is just a bit of a specific one to us and our team, not sure about others on the call, but when it comes to giving folks the right roles and the right permissions, it's just been a bit difficult for us lately. And then some gray areas I mentioned, and these three are gray areas because while we've had successes in these areas, they kind of make us go, they come with their own challenges as we become more successful with them. The first one being delegated admin permission. So tying in with security roles. We've recently had a lot of users who are so excited about the platform and want to do more that they keep asking for more and more every week, every month, and it gets hard for us as a small team to work with them to get them everything. So we've been working on delegated admin permissions. New features and POCs. This is personally, I feel like this applies to every technology. It's always hard to keep up with the new stuff that comes in. As an engineer and developer, we always want the new stuff. It's great. Love seeing it. As an admin, it's so overwhelming. And it's hard to put in place the controls that need to be there, the support that needs to be there to put these new features out there and conduct POCs with our users. And then the last one here, I think this is a pretty common issue for a lot of people. And again, just for low code as a technology in general, is we find the range in skill set of our users widening every year. And that speaks to the nature of this platform, which is that it targets a very wide range of users. You can have basic users who have no experience in development come and try to use the platform, and then seasoned developers who also come to use the platform. And both come with a very different set of requirements, not just from a technical perspective, but from a support perspective. And it makes it hard, especially when it comes to the guidance we publish, the trainings we publish, even the positions that we take on the platform, and strategically where we want to go with it. So this is also, it's great that we target so many people and enable so many people across the org with this technology, but it's a gray area and a challenge because from a support perspective, it becomes very challenging. So now I'll dive into a success story of ours, one that's near and dear to my heart because this is how I got introduced to the platform as an engineer. I worked in automation. I worked specifically in the infrastructure space. And this was the first solution I worked on for probably around 2 years. And even now, I still kind of help the team with it, though I've moved on. And it was a really successful use case that demonstrated to leadership how powerful the platform can be. So where we started, so in the beginning, and this is before 2022, this is what our infrastructure request form looked like. It was called the IRF, and it's the second most hated process in all of BTS. The first one is actually being solved by Power Platform right now as well, but I'll talk about it later if I have time. The point being, so this was how most people would request infrastructure items, anything from maybe you just need an S3 bucket to you need servers or whatever else. It took, and this is maybe being nice and conservative, 1 to 3 months for a turnover time on a request. This was a SharePoint form. It was over 10 years old. Everything was done via emails. There was no request tracking whatsoever. You just sent to it and you just sent the form out and prayed. It was mostly free form, free text, so there was really no validation. People could just type in whatever they think they needed and then hit submit. And because of how long it took for these requests to be turned over, people would often submit their dev, test, and prod configurations all at once in order to mitigate the chances of them running into timeline delays later. And this was an issue because of resourcing and capacity. People would have these items requested and provisioned, but they wouldn't be ready to use them yet. So they would sit there idly and take up space. And also for a cost perspective, as soon as these items are provisioned, again, even if the users are not using them, they still have to start paying for them right away. And another note about this is that this was only to build the infrastructure. When it came to putting it together, getting access and the right permissions, that was a whole other process that wasn't even fully managed by this. And the intake for all this form went manually, again, via email to a handful of people called TPMs or technical project managers who would look through every request manually, assign them to the right engineers, and then facilitate that interaction back and forth via lots of emails and meetings until the user got the correct configuration that they needed. So when IRF is mentioned here, it makes some people's blood boil. But that's how the old process was. So the new process started with Azure DevOps, actually. The backend, the automation team started using Azure DevOps pipelines to build automations on just for the build. And this was just for the engineers. That was the audience. Just so they didn't have to go into multiple systems and do the configurations and builds manually. They put all of it into Azure DevOps pipelines so that they could be triggered just via some accessible API endpoints. And this was really good at first. It had some good success. And then the team decided, let's try to put a front end on it, maybe try to get a couple more people using it. And that's when Power Apps and Power Automate came into the picture. And I also threw in SharePoint in there because that's where a lot of the data was stored. So what you're seeing here, this image, is the first iteration of this application. Very simple. There were only a handful of items that people could provision in AWS or on-prem. The data was saved to SharePoint. And then all Power Automate did was trigger the correct pipeline for the right build. And the way this worked is that it was just a form that had some validation. Users could input some stuff and hit submit and then trigger the build. But it was one form at a time, still one item at a time. So if you needed 5 servers, you're submitting the same form 5 times. And everything was still done via emails in terms of whether the build was successful, what were the configuration details after the successful build. So while the solution was good, it still had a lot of room for improvement. And that's when we made a big leap in 2023. I say we did a rebuild, a complete rebranding of the process and the application, and then a release to the users. So the main difference is that we added Oracle and SQL to the back end and a tremendous amount of work to the front end. The screen share that you see right now is the current application that's in production and how it works. And it is wildly different from the first iteration, if you can believe. So what we ended up having here is that the main changes, a lot more validation because we integrated with our enterprise data systems in Oracle and SQL. We were able to validate or even pre-populate in a lot of cases these forms for users so that there was way less free text, way less human error. And in some cases, we also implemented role-based controls so that depending on the particular user's role and permissions, they might have fields they can't control that are pre-populated by the application. Or some people who are engineers will have it pre-populated, but they have the option to overwrite it. And this was a big change because it greatly drove down the failure rate of our builds. Because if I'm being honest, in the beginning, over half of the builds would fail due to a lot of user error, actually, a lot of typos. So that was a big thing for us. We now have Azure infrastructure items as well that can be provisioned. So now it's over 20 items, I think, that can be provisioned. It's a cart ordering system, if you noticed. So it's no longer one item at a time. You can now provision an entire system in one go. Select all the items that you need, set the quantities that you need, set the configurations that you need for each one, and submit the order in one go. Of course, you could also save drafts. So that was, and these were all features requested by users, by the way. So that they could build and save these orders as they worked with business, worked with the vendors to figure out all the details. They could fill this out together with the end users to make sure that it was being filled out properly. We implemented pricing, we implemented request tracking. Obviously, everything is now saved to SQL instead of just SharePoint. And then again, there's those role-based access and security controls that were built in. And if you'll notice, right where this screen share is right now, it just hit approve, and there's a statement that the users need to accept before they hit approve, or before they hit accept, excuse me. There are no approvals in this application. As soon as users hit submit order and accept the little disclaimer there, provisioning begins immediately for everything that they submitted, which brings me to the impact. So we drove down the process that took, weeks, maybe months of turnaround time to 1 to 2 hours, 2 hours at most, really, because as soon as you hit submit, it triggers all of the pipeline builds immediately. And then all the user has to do is wait for the notification that it was built successfully. There are failure notifications as well if there's a failure, and they get all of the configuration details that they need returned with the success message. And this was a huge win for us in that time reduction, because now it reduced a lot of user frustration, first of all, gave our engineers and our compliance team was a lot of confidence in the builds because they're fully automated. And this was built together with our infra teams, with our security teams to make sure everything that's built is up to code and up to standards. The TPMs could breathe a sigh of relief because the bottleneck is no longer with them. They are now free to just help the users who really need their help. And the folks who are engineers or more technical can just come to this application to provision it themselves. It's not written here, but I mentioned this specifically because it's a piece of feedback we received a lot, which is that engineers would say, I know exactly what I need. Why do I have to go through this process and go through a TPM and go through everything to get it? And then there are users who are like, I have no idea what I need. I'm overwhelmed. I need help. We can now separate those two groups out and make sure they get exactly what they need. So a couple of metrics that I call out here as of 2022-23, which is when we push this second version out, we have over 2,400 successfully provisioned infrastructure items in the last year or two. We drove down that provisioning failure rate by 50% since 2022. We have over 20 different items now that can be provisioned via this solution, and over 250 unique users who use this application now. And this was huge because the first application had maybe 20 people who were allowed to use it because it was so technical in terms of the fields that people had to fill out. And there was basically zero user assistance in that application, excuse me. And then the last one I like to call out here is that we have all six of our BTOs represented among our users. This is important because it was really only central IT, core IT, and engineers who were doing these builds. But now across all of our business technology organizations, we have users from all six of them who are now provisioning their own infrastructure and then doing their own builds. So this is still in use today. These numbers keep going up. The team actively works on and pushes new versions of this application to this day. And it's just a wonderful solution. It's a lot of people keep sharing how great it is, especially those who are around the time of the old original SharePoint form. And I just love this story. It's one of our best and most impactful stories here. So I am running low on time, so I'm gonna move on to the last bit that I have here, which is about the future of Power Platform at AbbVie. And when I created this slide, I actually modified it afterwards to say it's more about the future of low-code development at AbbVie. So I structured this in 5 ways. What I think 2025 and onwards will look like for AbbVie is that me personally, I would like to see a low-code technology practice form, not just a Power Platform practice, sorry, Randall and Scott, but a low-code practice so that there are other tools, multiple tools that can help cover a variety of complexities and use cases, because we have hit a lot of limits with the Power Platform as well as powerful as it is. But going in order here. So first and foremost, of course, we're still driving the Power Platform. Despite what I just said, it is still the dominant platform at AbbVie, even though we have a couple other low-code tools that are used across the org. We're definitely putting in a lot more effort, resources, and investments into the different parts of the platform, not just Power Apps and Power Automate. Of course, Copilot, everything related to AI is not even on the horizon. It's here, and we are dealing with it and trying to enable it for our users. Strategic alignment is the next one. Again, we started with pockets of users, but we're gradually becoming a more leader-driven platform. This wasn't even a pitch, and the Power Platform actually it wasn't us pitching it to our leadership. Our leadership has actually come to us and asked, hey, what are we doing with citizen development? What are we doing with low-code development? We want to see more of this in our future roadmaps. And that was just great for us to hear, and me personally, because I do believe in the power of this platform. And it's just a matter of now working with those leaders to make sure we are aligned in our strategy. The next one that I have is fostering a low-code mindset across the org. This is all about, I think, democratizing development and changing how people see development at our org. And remember, we're not even a technology org. This is our first pillar at AbbVie when it comes to low code is business enablement, enabling the non-technical users. And I think in the industry as well, again, I mentioned that I feel like low code is still a gray area. A lot of people are still figuring out how to approach it, how to govern it, where it fits in within their enterprise applications, within their development tools. These are conversations that we're trying to have more regularly with users and with leadership again, and to create those partnerships that I think are needed, that are definitely needed with other parts of our IT organizations. Next, I have Center of Practices. This is a big focus area for us. Again, this is a citizen development platform. We want to enable our users to be able to do things for themselves without feeling like, governance is leaning over their shoulder and watching them or dictating everything that they need to do. And we already see a lot of these popping up, and we'd really just like to focus on fostering and facilitating the creation of more of these COPs around the org and literally around the world for us, so that people can work together, utilize each other, and just spread the knowledge. And then finally here, I mentioned this earlier, is just around more tools. We are actively exploring the tools that are currently used at AbbVie that fall into the low code, no code space, but also other tools that are up and coming in the industry, because we want to make sure that we can cover a variety of use cases and complexities. And we have hit a lot of limitations with the Power Platform that we've worked with Microsoft on. And sometimes due to circumstance or just due to the technology, we can't get over them and we have to pivot to a new solution. And that's okay. I personally think that low code, no code, it is a sliding scale from no code all the way to pro code. And I want to be able to build a technology stack that covers that whole scale. So we are at 12:50 already by my time. That was the end of my prepared content. I know I spoke pretty fast and jumped around a lot because I am passionate about this technology. I love what I do despite the chaos and the challenges. But thank you for listening. I hope this was insightful. I hope this was helpful, or at least that you could commiserate with me on the challenges that this platform can bring, but also have some hope in the successes that it can bring as well. Scott, Randall, back to you guys.
Thank you so much, Lily. I have one real quick question. I don't know if Randall has any as well. That 1,200 acres is an impressive number. And you probably won't be able to give me like an exact proportion, so no pressure here, but is that a mix of kind of professional developers who are using it to kind of go a little quicker, or is it more folks that weren't previously developing that now identify as citizen developers, or is it, is it right down the middle?
I can't tell you the exact composition, but it's definitely a mix. And I can tell you it started definitely with engineers, and we definitely know most of the increase has come from citizen developers. Okay. Because they're reaching out to us directly, and because of the engagement through the community, it is mostly scientists and non-technical. It always amazes me when someone tells me they have a PhD in some field and they're like, but I'm here to try to use Power Automate. And I'm like, oh, I have to teach you something? Okay.
So cool. Awesome. Yeah. Randall, any questions you had before I close this out here?
Nope, I think I'm good.
Oh, looks like we got one in the chat here last moment. Are all the users on standard licenses, and how do you handle premium licenses?
Yes. So all of our users, yes, every single employee is on a standard license, and they get that as soon as they're on board at the company. For premium licenses, we do have a contract with Microsoft and have a certain amount. And we have a request process for folks who want premium, basically. We don't really, it's just if they accept the chargeback, the cost of the license, we do give it to them. Sometimes we screen specific cases depending on what they want it for. But our premium license process is pretty robust now too. It's actually we're almost fully automated with it.
How fitting.
That brings up, I guess, another question too, is just in terms of how did you guys take on, and maybe this is another session actually, but take on the chargeback model, if you will, in terms of, yeah, they're booking it, they're building, they need licenses to do an app. How are you doing that chargeback?
Oh, yeah, that was one of our focus areas for this year and next year. We're actually just about to go through our first ever round of chargebacks for Power Platform resources. But the way we manage it is that when people, it's usually for premium licenses or environments slash Dataverse or anything that's credit based. So that's things like AI Builder, and I feel like I'm forgetting some other things. We also have like separate licenses for premium connectors like Power Apps, but also like Power Automate Premium for different things. And it's basically just automated through these request forms based on what people want. We require them to accept the charges to provide their cost centers. And it's an all or nothing model. So if they want it, they have it for the year. They pay for the year. We don't do, monthly, quarterly. They just have to accept that, or else it's too much for us. And then just on a regular basis, we work with our finance team to submit these chargeback processes, and then they handle that for us.
Okay. Good.
Awesome.
Scott, you want to close this out?
Yeah, well, first and foremost, thank you, Lily. That was really, really lovely to hear, and we appreciate you coming. We got to see, for those that may have been in Vegas for this, we got to see Lily in Vegas and meet in person, and she raised her hand. So a brave person and a fantastic presentation. This recording will be up on YouTube. Maybe don't hold us to the end of the day, but I'd say by the end of the day tomorrow, almost certainly. So if you want to come back to this, share this with anybody in your organization. We just put them on YouTube, so they're very easily accessible. We are in the third Thursday of November, I believe, next month, to give you all the time off for Thanksgiving. If you haven't seen Alex and Felipe present before from Boston Scientific, I encourage you to carve out some time. They run the COE over there, and they are doing some very, very cool stuff with Power Platform, have some beautiful, I literally say beautiful applications. To Lily talked about how the early days of Power Platform can be a little clunky UI wise. They've taken their UI to a whole nother level. And I think we're going to see some of how they've taken citizen development to a whole nother level with that higher orbit conversation. Join us on our community platform, aka.ms/powerhug. Give us feedback if you've got it. And as always, find us on LinkedIn. Reach out if you're interested in presenting at all. We'd love to hear from you, either coming up in December we're scheduling for, or looking into next year. The more we have, the merrier. And one last thank you again to Lily. Recording will be available shortly. Thanks, folks.
Thank you so much, guys.
Thanks, Lily. Appreciate it.
Bye.